I see you reaching for your phone again. Not because you truly require anything that waits behind that glowing screen, but because your mind has already begun to surrender before the day itself has even asked anything of you. And what troubles me is not that you possess such a device, for every age invents its own distractions, but that you have slowly allowed yourself to believe that every vibration deserves your attention, every opinion deserves your emotion, every passing thought deserves your obedience, until the ruler of your own inner kingdom has quietly abandoned his throne and permitted strangers, circumstances, memories, and imagined futures to govern a realm that was entrusted to you alone. And if this continues long enough, you will awaken one morning, believing that fortune has made you miserable, when in truth it was not fortune at all, but your own neglected judgment that quietly handed away the keys to your peace. Look carefully upon the life you have fashioned, not with condemnation, but with honesty, because honesty is the beginning of every restoration. And you will discover that your exhaustion does not arise merely from the labor you perform, but from the invisible burdens you insist upon carrying, from conversations that ended long ago, yet continue without cease inside your imagination, from fears that have never entered the world outside your mind, yet occupy your thoughts as though they had already become reality, from comparisons with faces you encounter, through glowing screens whose triumphs have been polished while their struggles remain concealed, and from the endless habit of asking the world to become quieter before you have learned how to quiet yourself. You believe that your enemy waits somewhere beyond you, perhaps in the difficult employer who rarely offers praise, perhaps in the crowded streets that steal your patience, perhaps in the former companion whose happiness appears to accuse you of your own regrets, perhaps even in the relentless current of messages, images, and demands that pursue you from morning until night. Yet none of these possesses the authority you imagine they possess, because events merely arrive as events have always arrived, indifferent and silent, while it is your judgment that clothes them with terror or resentment, your imagination that transforms passing discomfort into permanent suffering, and your unwillingness to examine your own thoughts that allows small disturbances to grow into tyrants. When I wrote for myself during long campaigns, surrounded by uncertainty, illness, betrayal, and the constant reminder that every emperor is as mortal as the humblest laborer, I returned again and again to a truth that neither armies nor centuries have altered, namely that you have power over your mind and not over outside events. And although those words have been repeated so often that many have forgotten their weight, they remain as immovable as the stars, because they do not promise comfort but freedom. And freedom begins the moment you cease demanding authority over what never belonged to you and instead reclaim authority over the one province entrusted entirely to your care. And because this authority cannot be bestowed by fortune nor stolen by misfortune, it must instead be cultivated through habits so ordinary that the impatient overlook them while the wise quietly transform themselves through them. And therefore, when the morning first receives you, before the world has placed its countless demands upon your attention, resist the ancient temptation to become a servant before you have remembered that you were born to govern yourself, allowing your thoughts to settle in silence before inviting the noise of the multitude into your mind, writing with deliberate care the few duties that truly belong to this day, moving your body not merely to strengthen muscle but to remind your spirit that discipline is first learned through willing obedience to reason, and delaying every unnecessary glance toward the endless procession of opinions until you have first established that your own judgment shall occupy the highest seat within your soul, because a fortress is never conquered at noon if its gates have already been abandoned before sunrise. As the hours unfold, you must also learn to examine every troubling impression with the calm curiosity of a judge rather than the panic of an accused prisoner. For your imagination possesses a remarkable talent for presenting possibilities as certainties and fears as prophecies, although neither has yet earned the dignity of truth. And whenever anxiety begins, weaving elaborate stories about what another person intended, what tomorrow may contain, or how some failure has forever defined your character, Pause long enough to remember. Another reflection that often returned to me during difficult seasons, namely that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. For this estimate is not carved into stone, but written upon water. Capable of changing the moment reason returns to its rightful office. And therefore you should ask yourself, with complete sincerity, whether the event before you has truly wounded your character, or whether your own interpretation has merely borrowed the mask of reality and persuaded you to bow before an illusion. There is yet another practice, without which every noble intention remains nothing more than pleasant conversation. For each day inevitably presents a task that quietly invites delay, whether it appears in the form of work demanding sustained attention, a difficult conversation postponed for weeks, the discipline of study after the excitement of novelty has faded, or the simple promise you once made to yourself and have broken so often that your own confidence has begun to distrust your words. And it is precisely here that character is forged, because every fulfilled promise lays another stone within the unseen walls of your inner fortress, while every neglected promise quietly removes one, until eventually you either inhabit a stronghold capable of resisting every storm or wander through ruins built by your own repeated surrender. And I would have you remember what I once urged myself upon waking, that at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. For the purpose of your life has never been endless comfort, but faithful action, performed because it is right rather than because it is pleasant. If these practices appear too small to influence the vast confusion of modern life, then you have misunderstood the nature of both greatness and decay, because no empire collapses in a single afternoon and no noble soul is restored by a single heroic gesture, but each is shaped through countless unnoticed decisions that accumulate with the patience of falling rain, until years later one man wonders how he became so calm amid adversity, while another wonders how he became so anxious despite possessing everything he once desired, never recognizing that destiny often disguises itself as daily habit, and that the direction of an entire lifetime is quietly determined by thoughts that seem too insignificant to examine when they first entered the mind. Therefore I ask nothing extraordinary of you, nor do I invite you to withdraw from the world as though wisdom required isolation from ordinary responsibilities, because the marketplace, the crowded road, the demanding employer, the silent disappointment, the unexpected insult, and even the restless glow of the device resting in your pocket are not obstacles placed before your path, but the very ground upon which philosophy proves its worth. For principles that survive only in silence deserve admiration perhaps, but not trust, whereas principles that remain steady amid distraction become companions that no circumstance can separate from you. And it is only by returning again and again to this quiet labor of governing yourself that you gradually discover the remarkable truth that peace was never hidden in distant mountains nor reserved for fortunate people, but was waiting patiently behind the discipline you postponed. For this reason, I leave you with no promise that life will become easier, because such promises belong to merchants, seeking customers rather than to those who seek truth. Yet I will promise something far greater, namely that every event which once seemed capable of shaking your entire existence will gradually diminish in power as your own judgment grows stronger, until criticism becomes instruction instead of injury. Delay becomes opportunity instead of frustration. Solitude becomes conversation with your better nature instead of loneliness. And uncertainty becomes the place where courage quietly performs its work without demanding applause, because the greatest victories are rarely witnessed by crowds but are achieved within a single human soul that finally decides it shall no longer be governed by impulse. For the next 7 days, therefore, carry yourself as though you alone stand watch over the gates of an ancient city whose safety depends entirely upon your vigilance, refusing entrance to needless resentment, to imagined disasters, to envy disguised as ambition, to anger disguised as strength, and to every thought that weakens rather than strengthens the ruler within, while welcoming patience, disciplined action, gratitude, clear judgment, and steadfast resolve with the honor reserved for trusted allies. And when these 7 days have passed, do not ask whether the world has changed, because it almost certainly has not, but ask instead whether the sovereign within you has awakened, whether your mind has begun to obey reason more readily than emotion, whether your peace now rests upon foundations that circumstance cannot easily disturb, and whether you have at last understood that the greatest empire entrusted to your care has never been measured by land, wealth, reputation, or applause, but by the quiet dominion you exercise over yourself each passing day. And if you discover even the smallest beginning of that dominion, then protect it with unwavering devotion, strengthen it through daily discipline, enlarge it through honest reflection, and continue building your fortress until no storm, no opinion, no fear, and no fortune can compel your soul to kneel before anything except reason itself.